The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Kensington Palace, as young Prince Louis wandered through the gardens with his nanny. At just 4 years old, Louis possessed the natural curiosity that made every day an adventure. His blonde hair caught the sunlight as he skipped along the familiar pathways, stopping occasionally to examine interesting flowers or chase butterflies that danced among the rose bushes. The palace gardens had always been Louis's playground. He knew every corner, every hidden pathway, and every secret spot where he could play hide-and-seek with his siblings Prince George and Princess Charlotte. But today felt different somehow. There was a special energy in the air, a sense of anticipation that even a young child could feel. Earlier that morning, there had been unusual activity around the palace. Men in suits had been walking back and forth, speaking in hushed tones into their phones. Workers had been preparing something in a particular section of the garden that Louis had never paid much attention to before. His mother, the Princess of Wales, had been speaking quietly with palace staff, and Louis had noticed that she seemed more emotional than usual. Catherine had been preparing for this day for months. The unveiling of Princess Diana's statue was not just a public event, but a deeply personal moment for the entire royal family. She knew that explaining Diana's significance to her youngest child would be challenging. How do you tell a 4-year-old about a grandmother he would never meet? How do you convey the love, loss, and legacy of someone who had touched so many lives around the world? Prince William had been equally thoughtful about this moment. He wanted his children to understand who their grandmother was, not just as a princess or a public figure, but as a mother who would have loved them beyond measure. He had been showing them photographs of Diana, telling them stories about her kindness, her laughter, and her incredible ability to connect with people from all walks of life. As Louis continued his morning exploration, he noticed something new in the distance. There seemed to be something different about the sunken garden, the area that his mother had told him was being prepared for something special. The garden had always been beautiful, filled with Diana's favorite flowers, white roses, forget-me-nots, and sweet peas that created a symphony of colors and fragrances. The sunken garden held particular significance that Louis was still too young to fully understand. This had been one of Diana's favorite places in all of Kensington Palace. She would often walk through this garden when she needed quiet moments to think, to find peace, or simply to enjoy the beauty of nature. It was here that she had found solace during difficult times, and it was here that her sons had decided to place her memorial. Louis's nanny gently guided him away from the garden area, explaining that there would be a special ceremony later that day. She spoke in the gentle, patient way that all royal nannies were trained to use, making everything sound like an exciting adventure rather than a formal occasion. Louis listened with the scattered attention span typical of a 4-year-old, more interested in a nearby squirrel than in talk of ceremonies and visitors. Meanwhile, preparations for the statue unveiling continued with military precision. Every detail had been planned and rehearsed. Security personnel had swept the area multiple times. The media had been assigned specific positions where they could capture the historic moment without intruding on the family's private grief and celebration. The statue itself remained covered under a green cloth, hidden from view until the appointed moment. Crafted by sculptor Ian Rank Broadley, the bronze figure captured Diana in a moment that perfectly embodied her spirit, surrounded by 3 children representing the universality of her appeal and her particular care for young people. The artist had worked closely with William and Harry to ensure that every detail reflected their mother's essence. Prince Harry had traveled from California specifically for this unveiling. Despite the tensions that had developed within the royal family, this was a moment that transcended personal disagreements. This was about honoring their mother's memory and ensuring that her grandchildren would grow up knowing who she was and what she represented. As the day progressed, more family members began to arrive at Kensington Palace. The Queen, despite her advanced age, had made it clear that she wanted to be present for this important moment. Prince Charles, now carrying the heavy responsibilities of his royal duties, arrived with Camilla, who understood the delicate nature of the occasion and the emotions it would invoke. Louis spent most of the morning playing with his siblings, though he could sense that today was different from their usual palace adventures. George, being older, had a better understanding of what was happening. He had been told about his grandmother Diana and had seen many photographs of her. Charlotte, with her naturally empathetic personality, seemed to intuitively understand that this was an emotional day for the adults around them. Catherine had dressed the children carefully for the occasion. Louis wore a smart little outfit that she hoped Diana would have approved of. As she helped him get ready, she whispered little stories about his grandmother, how she would have loved to play with him, how she would have laughed at his jokes, and how proud she would have been of all her grandchildren. The morning slowly gave way to afternoon, and the time for the ceremony approached. Guests began to gather in the sunken garden. Close friends of Diana, members of various charities she had supported, and representatives from organizations that continued her work were all present. The atmosphere was one of reverent celebration rather than mourning. Prince William stood near the covered statue, occasionally glancing toward the palace where his children were waiting. He wanted them to be part of this moment, but he also wanted to protect them from the intensity of media attention and public emotion that such events inevitably generated. The balance between public duty and private family moments was something he had learned to navigate carefully throughout his life. Louis, meanwhile, was growing increasingly curious about all the activity. He could hear voices from the garden, could sense the excitement and emotion in the air. His natural 4-year-old instincts told him that something very important was happening, and he wanted to be part of it. The moment finally arrived when it was time for the family to gather for the unveiling. Catherine took Louis's hand, her own hands trembling slightly with emotion. This would be her youngest child's first real introduction to the grandmother who had died years before he was born, yet whose presence was still felt so strongly throughout their family life. As they walked toward the sunken garden, Louis looked up at his mother and asked the innocent questions that only children think to ask. "Why is everyone here, Mama? What's under that green cloth? Are we having a party?" Catherine smiled through her tears, knowing that Diana would have loved these questions, would have gotten down to Louis's level, and explained everything with the patience and warmth that had made her such a beloved mother. The family gathered around the statue, and Prince William stepped forward to address the small crowd. His words were carefully chosen, speaking about Diana's enduring legacy, her love for her sons, and her commitment to making the world a better place for all children. As he spoke, Louis stood quietly beside his mother, sensing the gravity of the moment even if he didn't fully understand its significance. The green cloth was ceremoniously removed, and there she was, Princess Diana, captured in bronze, surrounded by children, her arms outstretched in a gesture that seemed to embrace everyone present. The likeness was striking, capturing not just her physical appearance but somehow conveying the warmth and compassion that had made her such an extraordinary figure. Louis stared at the statue with wide eyes, processing what he was seeing. This was his first real visual representation of his grandmother. Beyond the photographs he had seen in family albums, there was something about seeing her in three-dimensional form, surrounded by children like himself, that made her seem more real, more present. As the ceremony continued with speeches and the laying of flowers, Louis continued to study the statue. His young mind was working to understand the connection between this bronze figure and all the stories his parents had told him. The woman in the statue looked kind, looked like someone who would have enjoyed playing games and telling stories. The afternoon sun began to cast different shadows across the garden as the formal ceremony concluded. Family members and guests moved through the area, sharing memories and quiet conversations. Louis, still holding his mother's hand, found himself drawn back to the statue again and again. It was during one of these quiet moments, as the crowd had thinned and the formal proceedings had ended, that the most touching moment of the day occurred. Louis, with the fearless curiosity of childhood, approached the statue more closely than before. He studied the face, the expression, the way the bronze Diana seemed to be looking down at the children around her feet. And then, in a moment that would touch hearts around the world, Louis looked up at one of the guards standing nearby and asked the question that perfectly captured the innocence of childhood and the enduring power of love that transcends death. "Mummy, is that you?" The guard, a professional who had stood at attention through countless royal ceremonies, felt his eyes fill with tears. This wasn't his mother that the little prince was asking about, but in that moment, Louis's question seemed to speak for every child who had ever wondered about a loved one they had never met. Every grandchild who had tried to connect with family members known only through stories and photographs. Catherine heard the question and knelt down beside her youngest son. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the conversation she knew would be the first of many about the remarkable woman who would have been Louis's grandmother. How do you explain to a 4-year-old that love continues even after death? How do you help a child understand that some people become even more present in our hearts after they're gone? The guard, still moved by Lewis's innocent question, remained professionally composed while inside his heart broke a little. For this sweet child who would never get to experience his grandmother's hugs, never hear her laugh, never have her read him bedtime stories or take him on the kind of adventures that grandmothers are famous for. As the day drew to a close and the family prepared to return to their private quarters, Louis took one last look at the statue. The bronze Diana seemed to glow in the late afternoon light, and for a moment it was easy to imagine that she was really there, really present, really watching over her family with the love that had defined her life. This first encounter with his grandmother's memorial had planted seeds in Louis's young mind. Questions about family, about love, about people who are important even when they're not physically present. These were concepts that would grow and develop as he grew older. But the foundation had been laid on this emotional afternoon in the sunken garden at Kensington Palace. The days following the statue unveiling brought a flood of new questions from Prince Louis. His encounter with his grandmother's memorial had awakened a curiosity that his parents knew would need careful nurturing. Each morning brought fresh inquiries about the lady in the garden, about why she was made of bronze, and about when he might see her again. Catherine found herself having conversations with her youngest son that she had never imagined she would need to have so early. Lewis's questions were simple but profound, in the way that only a child's questions can be. "Why can't the stone lady talk to me?" he asked one morning over breakfast. "If she's my grandmama, where does she live? Can we invite her for tea?" Prince William watched these conversations with a mixture of joy and sadness. Joy because his son was showing interest in learning about Diana. Sadness because it reminded him of all the moments his mother would miss with her grandchildren. He had dreamed of the day when Diana would meet his children, would spoil them with gifts and attention, would be the kind of grandmother who always had time for adventures and stories. The palace staff had noticed a change in young Louis as well. He had always been an inquisitive child, but now his questions seemed more focused, more purposeful. He would ask the gardeners about the flowers in the sunken garden, wanting to know which ones were his grandmother's favorites. He would study family photographs with new intensity, trying to spot his grandmother in group pictures from before he was born. Maria, Lewis's beloved nanny, found herself becoming an important part of this learning process. Having worked with the royal family for several years, she had heard many stories about Princess Diana from the staff who had known her. She began sharing some of these lighter, more child-appropriate memories with Louis during their daily walks and playtime. "Your grandmother," Maria would tell him, "loved to laugh. She had the most wonderful laugh that could fill up an entire room. And she loved children more than anything in the world. She would have thought you were absolutely perfect." These simple statements helped Louis begin to form a picture of Diana not as a distant figure from history, but as someone who would have been an active, loving presence in his life. The security detail assigned to the young prince also found themselves touched by his innocent questions about his grandmother. These were men and women trained to remain professional and alert, but Louis's sweet curiosity about Diana was impossible to ignore. When he asked Guard Thompson, "Did you know my stone grandmama when she wasn't stone?" the usually stoic guard had to work hard to maintain his composure. Guard Thompson, whose full name was James Thompson and who had actually served during Diana's time at the palace, found himself in the unique position of being able to share first-hand memories with Louis. During quiet moments in the garden, he would tell the little prince about how his grandmother would often stop to chat with the guards, asking about their families and remembering details about their lives that impressed everyone who worked with her. "She would remember if your wife was expecting a baby," Thompson told Louis during one of their garden walks. "She would ask about your children's school plays and birthday parties. She made everyone feel important, like they mattered to her personally." Louis listened to these stories with rapt attention, building a mental picture of a woman who seemed almost magical in her kindness. Catherine began incorporating more structured learning about Diana into Louis's daily routine. She created a special photo album filled with pictures of Diana, with William and Harry as children, showing Louis how his father and uncle had looked when they were his age. The resemblance between Louis and his father at the same age was striking, and Catherine would point out similarities that made Diana feel more connected to their current family life. "Look," Catherine would say, pointing to a photograph of William at age 4. Your papa looked just like you when he was little. And see how happy Grandmama Diana looks holding him? That's exactly how happy she would look holding you if she were here today. These conversations helped Louis understand that love could exist across time, that people could care deeply about others they had never met. Prince George, being older and more sophisticated in his understanding, became an important teacher for his younger brother. He had been told more detailed stories about his grandmother and could share these with Louis in the simple language that one child uses with another. George would explain that Grandmama Diana had been very special, that people all over the world had loved her, and that she would have been the best grandmother ever. Princess Charlotte, with her natural empathy and emotional intelligence, seemed to intuitively understand Louis's need to learn about Diana. She would include Grandmama in their pretend games, setting an extra place at their toy tea parties, and talking about what Diana might have liked to eat or what games she would have wanted to play with them. The children's questions also prompted William and Catherine to reach out to some of Diana's closest friends, people who could share personal memories that went beyond the public image. Lady Sarah McCorquodale, Diana's sister, was particularly helpful in providing stories that showcased Diana's sense of humor and her natural way with children. Diana would have been on the floor playing with your children within minutes of meeting them. Sarah told Catherine during one of their conversations. She never worried about getting her clothes dirty or messing up her hair if it meant making a child laugh. She would have been the grandmother who always said yes to one more story, one more game, one more adventure. These conversations gave Catherine and William ammunition for the ongoing dialogue with Louis about his grandmother. They could share specific examples of Diana's playfulness, her creativity, and her absolute devotion to making children feel loved and special. As weeks passed, Louis's understanding of his grandmother began to deepen and evolve. He started to grasp that she had been a real person who had lived in the same rooms he played in now, who had walked the same hallways and gardens that made up his daily world. This realization made her feel more real and present to him. The palace librarian, Mrs. Henderson, became another important figure in Louis's education about his grandmother. She had carefully curated a collection of age-appropriate books and materials about Diana that focused on her charitable work with children and her role as a loving mother. These resources helped Louis understand that his grandmother had been famous not for being important, but for being kind. One of the books showed photographs of Diana visiting hospitals, playing with sick children, and bringing smiles to their faces. Louis studied these pictures intently, asking his mother, "Why is she with sad children? Did she make them happy?" These questions opened up conversations about compassion, about using your position to help others, and about the importance of kindness in making the world better. Another book focused on Diana's work with landmine victims. Though it was presented in very simple terms appropriate for a young child, the concept that some people around the world needed help and that his grandmother had worked to provide that help began to plant seeds of social awareness in Louis's developing mind. The playroom at Kensington Palace became a laboratory for Louis's growing understanding of his grandmother. He would create elaborate games involving rescuing people or helping those in need, often assigning the role of Diana to one of his toys. Catherine would find him having long conversations with his stuffed animals, explaining to them how important it was to be kind and help others, just like Grandmama Diana had done. These play scenarios showed that Louis was beginning to internalize not just the facts about his grandmother, but the values she had represented. He was learning that being part of the royal family meant having opportunities to help people, and that his grandmother had been someone who had used those opportunities in beautiful ways. The garden statue became a regular destination for Louis's daily walks. He would often ask to visit Grandmama and would stand quietly looking at the bronze figure, sometimes talking to it in the matter-of-fact way that children communicate with inanimate objects. The guards learned to give him extra time during these visits, understanding that something important was happening in the little prince's developing relationship with his grandmother's memory. During one particularly touching visit, Louis brought a small bouquet of flowers that he had picked from another part of the garden. With his nanny's help, he placed them at the base of the statue and told Diana about his day, sharing the kind of details that a child might share with a grandmother during a regular visit: what he had for breakfast, a funny thing his siblings had done, a new book he had learned to read. These one-sided conversations were heartbreaking and beautiful in equal measure. The staff who witnessed them understood that Louis was developing a real relationship with his grandmother's memory, finding ways to include her in his life despite her physical absence. Catherine began to notice that Louis's questions about Diana were evolving beyond simple curiosity. He was starting to ask more complex questions about love, about missing people, and about how families work when some members are no longer present. These conversations challenged her to find age-appropriate ways to discuss grief, memory, and the continuation of love beyond death. "Will I ever meet her?" Louis asked one evening as Catherine was tucking him into bed. It was the kind of question that no amount of preparation could make easy to answer. Catherine held her son close and explained that some people we love live in our hearts even when we can't see them, that love is stronger than anything else in the world, and that Diana's love for him was real even though she couldn't be there to show it in person. The impact of these conversations extended beyond Louis to the entire family. William found himself sharing more memories of his mother with all his children, prompted by Louis's innocent but profound questions. Harry, despite the distance and complications in his relationship with the family, stayed in touch regarding Louis's growing understanding of Diana, sharing his own memories and perspectives when appropriate. The palace staff noticed that the entire atmosphere around Diana's memory had shifted since Louis's first encounter with the statue. What had once been a topic approached with careful reverence and some sadness had become more integrated into the daily life of the family. Louis's natural, uncomplicated acceptance of his grandmother as part of his world had somehow made it easier for everyone to talk about her, to remember her, and to celebrate her continuing presence in their lives. As summer turned to autumn, Louis's understanding of his grandmother continued to grow and mature. He had moved from simple questions about the statue to a more nuanced understanding of Diana as a person who had loved children, helped people in need, and had been deeply loved by his father and uncle. This foundation would serve him well as he continued to grow and learn more about his family's history and his own place within it. Autumn brought a new phase in Prince Louis's relationship with his grandmother's memory. As the leaves changed color in the palace gardens, so too did the little prince's understanding of love, family, and the special place that Diana held in their lives. His questions had evolved from simple curiosity to deeper wonderings about the nature of relationships that transcend physical presence. The changing season also marked Louis's first real experience with missing someone. During a family trip to Balmoral, he had asked repeatedly when they would return to see his grandmama in the garden. This longing helped Catherine and William understand that their youngest son had formed a genuine emotional connection to Diana's memory, one that went beyond mere curiosity about a family member he had never met. Mrs. Elizabeth Pemberton, the palace's head librarian and a woman who had served the royal family for over 30 years, became instrumental in helping Louis understand the concept of love that continues beyond death. She had known Diana personally and could share intimate stories about the princess's relationship with books, learning, and her absolute devotion to her son's education. "Your grandmother," Mrs. Pemberton told Louis during one of their regular library sessions, "believed that stories could change the world. She would read to your father and uncle for hours, doing all the different voices and making even the simplest story into an adventure." Louis's eyes would light up during these sessions, especially when Mrs. Pemberton would read to him in the same animated style that Diana had used with William and Harry. The library sessions became a special tradition. Every Tuesday afternoon, Louis would meet Mrs. Pemberton in the small, cozy reading room that had been one of Diana's favorite places in the palace. Surrounded by books that Diana had once read to her own children, Louis began to understand that his grandmother's love for reading and storytelling was something that could be passed down to him. Catherine watched these sessions with wonder and some sadness. She could see how naturally Louis connected with this aspect of his grandmother's personality, how his own love of stories seemed to echo Diana's passion for books and learning. It was beautiful and heartbreaking to witness this genetic echo of interests and enthusiasms. Prince William began to take a more active role in sharing memories of his mother's parenting style with Louis. He told his youngest son about how Diana would turn everyday activities into games, how she would make even bath time or getting dressed into adventures filled with laughter and imagination. These stories helped Louis understand that Diana would have been the kind of grandmother who found joy in simple, everyday moments. "She would have loved teaching you to ride a bike," William told Louis one afternoon as they walked through the palace grounds. "She taught me and Uncle Harry, and she never worried about us falling down. She said that falling down was just part of learning to get back up again. These practical examples of Diana's parenting philosophy helped Louis understand that his grandmother had been someone who combined love with wisdom. The palace chef, Mrs. Margaret Davies, who had worked in the royal kitchens during Diana's time, became another source of intimate family memories. She shared stories about Diana's love of cooking with her children, how the princess would often come to the kitchens with William and Harry to help prepare special treats or learn about different foods. She wasn't afraid to get flour in her hair or chocolate on her dress, Mrs. Davies told Louis during one of his visits to the kitchen. She said that the best memories were made when families cooked together, when everyone got a little messy and had a lot of fun. These stories inspired Louis to ask if he could help in the kitchen, continuing a tradition that his grandmother had started with his father. As autumn deepened, Louis began to express his understanding of Diana through his own creative activities. In his art sessions with Miss Sarah Collins, the palace art instructor, he started creating pictures that he said were for Grandmama. These drawings showed families playing together, children reading books, and gardens filled with flowers. All themes that reflected what he had learned about Diana's interests and values. Miss Collins, who had also known Diana and had actually given art lessons to William and Harry years earlier, was moved by the way Louis's artistic expression seemed to naturally reflect his grandmother's spirit. His drawings were filled with joy, movement, and connection between people, themes that had defined Diana's approach to life and relationships. The drawing sessions became therapeutic for Louis in ways that the adults around him were just beginning to understand. Through his art, he was processing complex emotions about love, family, and loss, in the intuitive way that children naturally approach difficult concepts. His pictures told stories about a grandmother he had never met, but somehow knew intimately through the memories and love of those around him. One particularly touching drawing showed a little boy standing next to a tall lady with a crown, both of them surrounded by flowers. When Miss Collins asked Louis to explain the picture, he said simply, "That's me and Grandmama Diana in her garden. She's showing me her favorite flowers, and I'm telling her about my day at school." The matter-of-fact way he described this imagined interaction showed how real Diana had become in his internal world. Catherine began to notice that Louis's questions about Diana were helping her process her own relationship with her mother-in-law's memory. As she searched for age-appropriate ways to explain Diana's impact on the world, Catherine found herself learning new things about the woman who would have been her partner in raising these precious grandchildren. Lady Anne Glenconner, one of Diana's closest friends, visited the palace specifically to meet Louis and share some of her favorite memories of his grandmother. She told him about Diana's sense of humor, her love of practical jokes, and her ability to find something to laugh about even during difficult times. These stories helped Louis understand that his grandmother had been someone who brought joy wherever she went. "She once hid in a cupboard to surprise your father on his birthday," Lady Anne told Louis, making him giggle with delight. She jumped out shouting "surprise" and scared him so badly that he fell over backwards. But then they both laughed until their stomachs hurt. Stories like these helped Louis see Diana as more than a formal royal figure. She became a real person who enjoyed fun and silliness just like he did. The winter months brought new opportunities for learning about Diana's charitable work, presented in ways that a young child could understand and relate to. Catherine and William began taking Louis on small, informal visits to some of the organizations that Diana had supported, showing him how helping others could be a way of continuing his grandmother's legacy. During a visit to a children's hospital, Louis watched his parents interact with young patients in ways that clearly echoed Diana's approach to such visits. He saw how a smile, a listening ear, or a moment of genuine attention could bring comfort to children who were facing difficult times. These experiences helped him understand that being kind wasn't just about being nice, it was about making a real difference in people's lives. Grandmama Diana would come to places like this, Catherine explained to Louis as they walked through the hospital corridors. She would sit with children and read them stories, just like Mrs. Pemberton reads to you. She believed that everyone deserves to feel special and loved, especially when they're not feeling well. This connection between his own experience of being read to and his grandmother's charitable work helped Louis understand how love could be shared beyond just family. The hospital staff, many of whom remembered Diana's visits from years past, were touched by Louis's gentle manner with the young patients. He seemed to have inherited his grandmother's natural ease with children, her ability to connect quickly and genuinely with people who might be feeling scared or lonely. During one visit, Louis spent time with a little girl who was about his own age. She was shy at first, but Louis's uncomplicated friendliness soon had her smiling and laughing. As Catherine watched this interaction, she could almost see Diana in her son's natural empathy and his instinct to make others feel comfortable and happy. The Christmas season brought new ways of including Diana in the family's traditions. Louis helped his mother choose flowers for Diana's grave at Althorpe, selecting white roses because he had learned they were her favorites. During the quiet moment at the gravesite, Louis left a small drawing he had made showing his family, with a space that he said was saved for Grandmama Diana. "She's always with us," he told his father that day, displaying the kind of simple wisdom that children sometimes possess. "Even when we can't see her, she's still part of our family." William was moved by his son's uncomplicated acceptance of this complex truth, recognizing in Louis's words the kind of understanding that many adults struggle to achieve. The palace staff began to notice that Louis's relationship with Diana's memory was affecting the entire atmosphere around discussions of the late princess. His natural, joyful approach to learning about his grandmother had somehow made it easier for everyone to talk about her, remember her, and celebrate her continuing influence on the family. Guard Thompson, who had become Louis's special friend during their garden walks, observed that the little prince seemed to carry Diana's spirit in his own personality. His kindness to the staff, his interest in others' well-being, and his natural empathy all seemed to echo qualities that had made Diana so beloved by those who knew her personally. "He has her gift for making people feel seen and valued," Thompson noted in his private journal. "When he asks about my family or remembers something I've told him about my children, it reminds me of how the princess used to make everyone feel important. It's like seeing a piece of her living on in this sweet little boy." As winter slowly gave way to early spring, Louis's understanding of his grandmother continued to evolve. He had moved beyond simple questions to a more sophisticated appreciation of how love could transcend death, how families could include people who were no longer physically present, and how the memory of someone special could inspire others to be more kind, more generous, and more loving in their daily lives. The foundation that had been laid during Louis's first encounter with Diana's statue had grown into something beautiful and lasting. He had learned that love was the strongest force in the world, that kindness could be a way of honoring those we miss, and that even though he would never meet his grandmother in person, her influence on his life was real and powerful. This understanding would serve Louis well as he continued to grow up in the public eye, giving him a sense of purpose and connection that went beyond his royal duties. He had learned that being part of the royal family meant having opportunities to make the world better, just as his grandmother had done, and that love was the most important legacy anyone could leave behind. Spring arrived at Kensington Palace with an explosion of color that seemed particularly meaningful in the sunken garden where Diana's statue stood surrounded by her favorite flowers. Prince Louis, now approaching his 5th birthday, had developed a more sophisticated understanding of his grandmother's place in his family's story. His questions had evolved from simple wonderment to thoughtful observations about love, legacy, and the ways that special people continue to influence the world even after they're gone. The approaching anniversary of Diana's death brought new conversations between Louis and his parents. Catherine and William had been preparing for this difficult time, knowing that their children's growing awareness of their grandmother would make this anniversary more poignant than in previous years. They wanted to help Louis understand that sadness and celebration could coexist, that missing someone could be balanced with joy in remembering them. Sarah Mitchell, the child psychologist who occasionally consulted with the royal family on matters concerning the children's emotional development, had advised that Louis's natural curiosity about death and remembrance should be encouraged rather than redirected. She explained that children his age were capable of understanding complex emotions if they were presented in age-appropriate ways. Louis is developing what we call a continuing bond with his grandmother, Dr. Mitchell explained to Catherine and William. This is actually a very healthy way for children to process relationships with deceased family members. He's creating an ongoing relationship with Diana that will evolve as he grows older. This professional reassurance helped the family understand that Louis's vivid sense of connection with Diana was not only normal, but beneficial for his emotional development. The palace gardens became Louis's classroom for learning about cycles of life, death, and renewal. The gardener, Mr. James Macready, who had tended Diana's favorite flowers for over 20 years, became Louis's teacher in understanding how things could be beautiful and alive in different ways. Through conversations about perennial flowers that returned each spring, Louis began to grasp the concept that love, like certain flowers, could appear to disappear but would always come back. "See these roses, young prince?" Mr. Macready would say during their garden walks. "They look like they're gone during the winter, but their roots are still alive under the ground. Come spring, they bloom again, more beautiful than ever." That's a bit like how love works. It might seem hidden sometimes, but it's always there, ready to bloom again when the time is right.
These garden lessons provided Louis with concrete metaphors for understanding abstract concepts about life and death.
He began to see Diana's influence on his family as similar to the root system of the roses, invisible but essential, providing nourishment and beauty that would continue to emerge in new ways throughout his life. Prince Harry's visit for the anniversary of Diana's death provided Louis with new perspectives on his grandmother. Despite the complicated dynamics within the family, Harry made a special effort to spend time with his nephew, sharing stories that only a son could tell about Diana's day-to-day life as a mother. "She would wake us up by jumping on our beds," Harry told Louis during a quiet moment in the sunken garden. "Not gently, either. She would bounce until we woke up laughing. And if we tried to hide under the covers, she would tickle our feet until we had to come out." These intimate details of Diana's parenting style helped Louis understand that his grandmother had been playful and fun, not just the serious, formal figure he might have imagined from official photographs. Harry also shared memories of Diana's approach to discipline, how she would use humor and creativity to teach important lessons. "When I was being stubborn about cleaning my room," Harry recounted, "she didn't just tell me to do it. She turned it into a game where we had to rescue my toys from the mess monster that had captured them. By the end, my room was clean and I had had so much fun that I forgot I had been arguing about it in the first place." These stories gave Louis insight into Diana's parenting philosophy and helped him understand how she had balanced being a loving mother with teaching important values. They also provided models for how his own parents approached child rearing, showing him that many of their family traditions had roots in Diana's innovations. The anniversary memorial service was Louis's first formal participation in a public remembrance of his grandmother. Catherine had carefully prepared him for this experience, explaining that there would be many people who had loved Diana and wanted to remember her together. She assured him that it was okay to feel sad, happy, or confused, that all emotions were welcome when remembering someone special. During the service, Louis sat quietly between his parents, occasionally whispering questions about the hymns, the flowers, or the people who were speaking about his grandmother. His presence added a layer of hope and continuity to the solemn occasion. Here was Diana's grandson, healthy and curious and loved, representing the future that she had helped create through her devotion to her sons. After the service, many of Diana's friends approached Louis to share brief memories or simply to tell him how much he resembled his father at the same age. Lady Sarah Chatto, Diana's close friend and confidant, knelt down to Louis's level and told him, "Your grandmother would have been so proud of the kind, thoughtful little boy you're becoming. She always said that the most important thing was to have a good heart, and I can see that you have inherited that from her." These interactions with Diana's friends provided Louis with a broader understanding of his grandmother's impact beyond just his immediate family. He began to realize that Diana had been important to many people, that her kindness and love had created a network of relationships that continued to flourish years after her death. The summer brought opportunities for Louis to participate in some of the charitable work that continued Diana's legacy. Catherine and William began including him in small, age-appropriate volunteer activities, showing him how helping others could be a way of honoring his grandmother's memory while making a real difference in the world. During a visit to a homeless shelter that Diana had regularly supported, Louis helped serve meals and spent time talking with some of the residents. His natural curiosity and lack of judgment made him a wonderful ambassador for the royal family's continuing commitment to Diana's causes. The shelter staff were impressed by his genuine interest in the people they served and his instinctive understanding that everyone deserved kindness and respect. "Why don't these people have homes?" Louis asked his mother after their visit. It was the kind of direct question that required careful handling, but it also showed that he was developing the social awareness that had been such an important part of Diana's worldview. Catherine explained about different life circumstances that could lead to homelessness, emphasizing that helping others was one of the most important jobs that members of the royal family could do. These charitable activities helped Louis understand that being privileged came with responsibilities. He began to grasp that his grandmother had used her position not just to attend fancy parties, but to bring attention and resources to people who needed help. This understanding would form the foundation for his own sense of purpose as he grew older. The summer also brought Louis's first official portrait session, where Diana's memory was specifically incorporated into the photographic narrative. The royal photographer, Mr. David Harrison, who had taken many photographs of Diana with William and Harry when they were children, was commissioned to create a series of images that would show the continuing connection between generations. In one particularly touching photograph, Louis stood in the same garden where Diana had once played with his father and uncle, holding a small photograph of Diana with young William. The image captured both the passage of time and the continuity of love within the family, showing how memories and relationships could be preserved and honored across generations. During the photo session, Mr. Harrison shared his memories of photographing Diana with her young sons. She was always more concerned with making sure the boys were comfortable than with how she looked in the pictures, he told Louis. She would make funny faces behind my camera to get them to smile naturally. She said that the best photographs were the ones that showed real happiness, not just perfect poses. These behind-the-scenes stories about Diana's approach to royal duties helped Louis understand that his grandmother had always prioritized authenticity and genuine emotion over formal protocol. This insight would prove valuable as he began to understand his own role within the royal family and the importance of staying true to himself while fulfilling public obligations. As autumn approached again, marking more than a year since Louis's first encounter with Diana's statue, his understanding of his grandmother had deepened considerably. He no longer saw her as mysterious or distant, but as a real person who had loved his father and uncle, who had enjoyed many of the same things he enjoyed, and who had used her position to make the world a better place. The conversations about Diana had also strengthened Louis's relationships with his older siblings. George, now more mature and understanding, had become a valuable source of information and perspective for his younger brother. Charlotte, with her natural empathy, often helped Louis process the more emotional aspects of learning about their grandmother. During family dinners, it became common for the children to share what they had learned about Diana that day, creating an ongoing dialogue that kept her memory alive and present in their daily lives. William and Catherine encouraged these conversations, understanding that talking about Diana naturally and regularly helped prevent her memory from becoming something heavy or sad that was only discussed on special occasions. Dr. Pressa Mitchell, during her periodic check-ins with the family, noted that Louis's development was progressing beautifully. His ability to understand complex concepts about love and loss, his growing sense of empathy for others, and his healthy integration of Diana's memory into his sense of self all indicated that the family's approach to helping him learn about his grandmother was working well. Louis is developing what we call resilient attachment, Dr. Mitchell explained. He's learning that love relationships can be strong and meaningful even when they involve loss or separation. This understanding will serve him well throughout his life, not just in relation to his grandmother's memory, but in all his relationships. As his 5th birthday approached, Louis had grown from a curious 4-year-old asking simple questions about a statue into a thoughtful child with a genuine understanding of his family's history and his own place within it. His relationship with Diana's memory had become a source of strength and purpose rather than sadness or confusion. The foundation laid during those first innocent questions in the garden had grown into something remarkable. A living connection between a grandmother and grandson that transcended death and continued to flourish through love, memory, and the ongoing commitment of those who had known Diana to keep her spirit alive for the next generation. The final chapter of Prince Louis's first year of truly knowing his grandmother began with his 5th birthday celebration, an event that highlighted how naturally Diana's memory had been woven into the fabric of his daily life. Rather than being a source of sadness or something that required special handling, Diana had become part of the family's ongoing story in ways that felt organic and life-affirming. Catherine had decided to incorporate elements that honored Diana into Louis's birthday party planning, not as a memorial gesture, but as a natural extension of their family traditions. She included some of Diana's favorite flowers in the decorations, served chocolate cake because she had learned that Diana had always chosen chocolate for her son's birthday celebrations, and organized games that reflected Diana's belief that birthday parties should be about joy and connection rather than formal ceremony. The party guests included not just Louise's young friends, but also some of the palace staff who had known Diana personally. Mrs. Pemberton brought a special gift, a first edition of one of the books that Diana had particularly loved reading to William and Harry. Guard Thompson presented Louis with a small photo album he had carefully assembled, containing pictures of Diana in the palace gardens throughout different seasons. "I thought you might like to see how your grandmother's garden looked during different times of the year," Thompson explained as he showed Louis the album. "She loved watching how the flowers changed with the seasons, just like you do now." The gift was deeply meaningful because it connected Louis's current experiences with his grandmother's past enjoyment of the same spaces. During the party, Louis's friends were naturally curious about the statue in the garden and the stories Louis could tell about his grandmother. With the unself-conscious honesty of children, they asked direct questions about why she was made of bronze and whether Louis missed her. Louis's answers showed remarkable maturity and emotional intelligence for a 5-year-old. "I don't miss her the way you miss someone who goes away," Louis explained to his friend Emma. "Because she's still here with us in lots of ways. She's in the flowers she planted, and in the stories Papa tells us, and in all the good things our family does to help people." His ability to articulate this complex understanding amazed the adults who overheard the conversation. The birthday celebration also marked the beginning of a new tradition that would become important to the family. Louis announced that he wanted to do something special for other children as part of his birthday, something that would make his grandmother proud. This led to the establishment of an annual birthday charity project, where Louis would choose a different children's organization to support each year. For his 5th birthday, Louis chose to collect books for children in hospitals, inspired by his understanding that Diana had often read to young patients during her charitable visits. The book collection became a family project, with George and Charlotte helping to organize the donations and Catherine and William using the opportunity to teach all their children about the importance of using their privilege to help others. The success of the book collection project showed how effectively Louis had internalized the values that Diana had represented. His natural impulse to turn his birthday into an opportunity to help others reflected the same spirit of service that had defined his grandmother's approach to royal duties. As autumn arrived, bringing the 2nd anniversary of Diana's statue unveiling, Louis's role in the family's remembrance activities had evolved significantly. He was no longer just a curious observer, but an active participant in keeping Diana's memory alive. His questions had evolved into contributions. His wondering had become wisdom. During the anniversary ceremony, Louis placed flowers at the base of his grandmother's statue with confidence and purpose. He had written a small note to accompany the flowers, dictated to his mother but expressing his own sentiments. "Dear Grandmama Diana, thank you for loving Papa and Uncle Harry so much. I promise to be kind like you were. Love, Louis." The note, simple as it was, captured the essence of what Louis had learned during his year of discovering his grandmother. He understood that love was action, that kindness was a choice, and that honoring someone's memory meant trying to live the values they had embodied. Prince William, reading his son's note during the ceremony, was moved by the mature understanding it represented. Here was his youngest child, who had never met Diana, making promises to live up to her example. It was a moment that perfectly captured how the past and future could be connected through love and intentional remembrance. The second winter brought new opportunities for Louis to demonstrate what he had learned about his grandmother's approach to helping others. During the Christmas season, he asked if he could visit the same homeless shelter they had visited earlier in the year, wanting to see how the people there were doing, and whether there was anything special he could do for Christmas. This request showed that Louis's charitable activities were not just one-off experiences, but part of an ongoing relationship with the concept of service. He was beginning to understand that helping others was not something you did occasionally when convenient, but a way of living that required ongoing commitment and attention. At the shelter, Louis helped serve Christmas dinner and spent time talking with residents about their lives and experiences. His genuine interest in people's stories, his ability to listen without judgment, and his natural warmth reminded many observers of Diana's famous ability to connect with people from all walks of life. One elderly gentleman at the shelter, Mr. Roberts, told Louis about how Diana had visited during the 90s and had spent time talking with him about his experiences as a veteran. "She made me feel like my story mattered," Mr. Roberts said. "She didn't just visit to be seen helping, she really cared about understanding who we were as people." This connection between past and present showed Louis how individual acts of kindness could have lasting impact. The encounter with Mr. Roberts led to Louis asking his parents about Diana's approach to charitable work. He wanted to understand how she had learned to talk to people who were different from herself, how she had known what questions to ask, and how she had made people feel comfortable despite the formality that usually surrounded royal visits. These conversations led to more structured learning about empathy, active listening, and the skills required for effective charitable work. Louis began to understand that helping others effectively required more than just good intentions. It required developing real skills in communication, understanding, and cultural sensitivity. As spring returned to the palace gardens, Louis marked his second year of knowing his grandmother, with a new level of integration between Diana's memory and his own developing identity. The lessons he had learned about kindness, service, and family love had become part of his natural way of interacting with the world. The palace staff noticed that Louis seemed to carry Diana's spirit not as a burden or an obligation, but as a natural extension of his own personality. His kindness to everyone he encountered, his curiosity about people's lives, and his instinctive understanding that his position came with responsibilities all reflected values that Diana had embodied. Mrs. Davies, the palace chef, observed that Louis had inherited Diana's gift for making people feel special in small ways. "He remembers details about people's lives the way she did," Mrs. Davies noted. "He asks about my grandchildren by name, remembers when someone has been sick, notices when staff members seem sad or worried. It's like having a little piece of the princess back in the palace." Dr. Mitchell, during her final assessment of Louis's adjustment to learning about his grandmother, noted exceptional emotional development. "Louis has achieved something quite remarkable," she reported. "He has developed a healthy, ongoing relationship with his grandmother's memory that enhances rather than complicates his sense of self. He sees Diana as a source of inspiration and guidance rather than as a loss or absence in his life." The success of Louis's integration of Diana's memory into his life had positive effects on the entire family. William found that talking about his mother had become easier and more natural. Charlotte and George had developed a deeper understanding of their family history, and Catherine had gained confidence in her role as someone who was helping to shape Diana's continuing legacy through her grandchildren. As Louis approached his 6th birthday, the transformation from a curious 4-year-old asking, "Mummy, is that you?" to a confident child who understood his grandmother's place in his life and his own role in continuing her legacy was complete. The question that had originally been asked in innocent confusion had evolved into a deep understanding of how love, memory, and purpose could be interwoven across generations. The statue in the sunken garden remained a focal point for Louis's relationship with his grandmother. But it was no longer the primary way he connected with Diana's memory. She had become integrated into his daily life through the values he practiced, the kindness he showed others, and the sense of purpose he was developing about his role in the world. On quiet afternoons, Louis could still be found in the garden talking to his grandmother's statue. But these conversations had evolved from questions to updates, from wondering to sharing. He would tell Diana about his school progress, about charitable projects he was planning, about ways he had tried to be kind to others, and about his growing understanding of what it meant to be part of a family dedicated to service. The guards who protected the garden had learned to give Louis privacy during these conversations, understanding that something important was happening during these moments of connection. They had witnessed the transformation of a curious child into a young person with a strong sense of purpose and identity, guided by the loving memory of a grandmother he had never met in person but knew intimately through spirit and example. The story that had begun with an innocent question had evolved into something much larger, a testament to the power of love to transcend death, the importance of keeping memory alive through action rather than just words, and the beautiful possibility that the best qualities of those we love can live on through the generations that follow. Prince Louis had learned that his grandmother was indeed with them, not in the bronze statue that had first captured his attention, but in the love that surrounded him, the values that guided his family, and the opportunities he would have throughout his life to make the world a little kinder, a little more compassionate, and a little more hopeful. Diana's legacy lived on not just in memory, but in the active love and service of her children and grandchildren, ensuring that her influence would continue to touch lives for generations to come. The question, "Mummy, is that you?" had been answered in the most beautiful way possible. Yes, she was there, not in bronze and stone, but in love and legacy, in kindness and purpose, in the ongoing story of a family committed to making Diana's dreams for a better world continue to come true through their own lives and service.